Good evening to everybody once again, and welcome to the Turning Point's second online webinar. My name is Tanya McCarthy. I'm one of the directors of the Turning Point, but more importantly, I am your host for this evening. Last week, the Turning Point presented an Afrikaans video on vraagwoorde, voegwoorde, en stompie. That video is now available on our YouTube channel. If you would like us to email the link to you, please let us know and we will do so tomorrow morning, along with the link to this current video. The Turning Point is working exceptionally hard in the background at the moment to be able to bring you a host of online resources. May I ask you to please send us feedback on how you find these webinars and let us know if this is something that you would like us to do more of in the future. Last week was an Afrikaans lesson, tonight is an English lesson, and next week will be a maths lesson aimed at children in grade 7 and up. If there is enough interest, we will then repeat the lesson or the pattern of lessons, doing Afrikaans, English, and then another maths lesson. Ultimately, our aim is to bring you lessons like this as a regular weekly event. The Turning Point Education aims to offer educational support for school students. Offering online webinars like this is just another way that we are able to help you. So please do share this initiative with family and friends. Tonight's topic is English comprehension skills. Anybody who's been in school for long enough will know that comprehension skills or comprehensions bring with them a fair degree of anxiety, stress, and possibly even frustration. Comprehensions sometimes cause our school marks to drop. The fact is that comprehension skills is a big and in-depth topic. So much so that the Turning Point has developed a 6-week lesson plan to teach you comprehension skills thoroughly and properly. Tonight is a very brief overview of comprehension skills. You all know the scenario. You've studied for your upcoming test or exam. You walk in nervous already, sit down, and your teacher gives you a whack of papers. On the front page is a story that you have not seen before and you are required to answer questions on. Comprehension skills, however, are so much more than just that. It takes time and effort to develop proper comprehension skills. I happen to know that some of tonight's listeners are writing a comprehension test tomorrow morning. So what are you going to do when your teacher gives you that test paper? Where do you start? And what happens if you don't understand? What we are going to look at tonight is some important test-taking tips and strategies on how to conquer your comprehension. Always start by looking at the whole page, and I mean the whole page. Take note of the small print. Things or details like the heading, the author, and the date that the article was written are all important facts. Oftentimes, you will find that your teacher actually asks you details like that, and so there should be what we call easy marks. Amazingly enough, so many children miss that. So always look out for those details. If you are still in primary school, you might be lucky enough that your teacher put some pictures on the comprehension page. Always look at the pictures. The pictures give us clues which help us understand the story. Unfortunately, for those of us in high school, this will not be the case. So always start by looking at the whole page, taking note of the finer details. Once you've done that, read through the whole story. While you are reading through the story, Ask yourself the following questions to gain a better understanding of the text in front of you. What is the story about? You would have heard your teachers carry on and on about the main idea of a story. The main idea is always important. Being able to identify the main idea means that you can summarize the whole story into one or two short sentences. Always ask yourself, what is the story about? Who is the story about? The main characters of a story are always very important. These are the people that you need to be able to know and know them well. Who is your story about? Where does the story take place? That's what we call the setting. The setting of a story gives us clues and in-depth ideas about the story. If you think, for example, a story that is written in the countrysides of London as opposed to the beaches of Normandy will give us a very different background to the story. Always ask yourself, where does the story take place? When was the story written? Knowing when the story was written, again, gives us detail and idea to the background of the story. Was the story written in the Second World War? Is it a futuristic story or someone's idea about what the future looks like? Always ask, when was the story written? Why was the story written? What is it that the author is wanting us to know? Is there a moral of the story? Is there a lesson that they're wanting us to learn? Always ask yourself, why was the story written? Who, what, where, when, and why are all questions that help us to develop what we call a story map. A story map is a very important and helpful comprehension skill, something that we would go into detail in, well, probably a whole lesson actually, on developing and writing story maps. Vocabulary. Oh, vocab, vocab, vocab. There will always be words in a comprehension text that you do not understand. Now, understanding vocab is actually a whole hour's worth of a lesson all by itself. Don't get stuck on words that you don't understand. The easiest way to understand words is to look at them in context. Read the word in the sentence and even in the whole paragraph. Read it again and even a third time if need be. Most of the time, you will be able to understand the difficult words simply by reading it in context. Once you've read through your story, ask yourself the who, what, where, when, why questions. And once you've understood the difficult vocabulary, the next step is to read through the questions. Always take note of the marks allocated to each question. This gives you an idea of how much detail is required in your answer. If a question is worth 2 marks, give 2 points. If it is worth 5 marks, give 5 points. When you are doing comprehensions, keep a highlighter handy. Always highlight the important words in the question. Words like explain and describe are actually asking different questions and require different types of answers. Again, understanding different question words is a whole lesson by itself. But for tonight, it is important to know that you need to highlight important question words. Then you need to go through the story again with a highlighter in hand, and highlight any of the answers that you come across. You can also write notes for yourself on your story page. I'm sure that every student in school would argue with me and tell me that writing your answers to the questions is the most important part of a comprehension. I would beg to differ. But it is an important skill and a very important step in the process. What you need to remember is to answer your questions in full sentences. Don't forget to use proper punctuation. Things like capital letters, full stops, question marks, and commas all make a difference. It is a language test, after all. Write according to the mark allocation. Again, if it's worth 2 marks, write 2 points. If it's 5 marks, give 5 points. Make sure you number your answers correctly and don't waste time on a difficult question. If you are not sure of the answer, leave it out and go back to it later. Comprehensions always ask us to make inferences. What are inferences? Most children ask. It's basically, in a nutshell, the same as making an educated guess based on the story. These are the questions in your comprehension test that start with words like, in your opinion. You need to give your opinion, but you need to make sure that it's relevant. For example, if your teacher is asking you about the weather or what the sky looks like, do not tell her about the beautiful green grass outside. A good example is a passage that talks about somebody whose eyes are red and they have a runny nose. The inference you can easily make there is that the character is sick. Always make sure that your answer is relevant to the text. Now this is the most important part of a comprehension. Check your work and check it again. Reread your answers. Have you actually written what you think you wrote? I have taught so many children over the years who argue with me and say, but that is what I wrote. And when they read it, they realize that that's what was in their head and not what came out on the paper. Make sure that you have written the answer you think you wrote. Also make sure that you have answered what the question is actually asking. If your teacher is asking you about your puppy, do not tell her about the weather. Make sure that your answer matches the question. And then go back and edit your work. If necessary, add capital letters, correct your punctuation, and check your spelling. Always go back and edit your work. As I said to you at the start of this is a very, very brief overview of a very detailed section of English work. It takes time and effort to develop proper comprehension skills. What we have run through in the last 12 minutes is a very brief overview of what you should do in a comprehension